In 2022, in a laboratory at Curtin University in Perth, Australia, a geologist named Anthony Clark fired laser beams into a thin sliver of rock. The rock was a fragment of the altar stone, the 6-ton slab lying flat at the dead center of Stonehenge. He was expecting the crystals inside to tell him the stone came from Wales, as everyone had believed for 80 years. Instead, the mineral clocks read back an age of up to 3 billion years, a signature that did not belong anywhere in southern Britain. It matched bedrock more than 430 miles to the north. He ran it again, then again. Every time, the answer came back the same, and every time it was wrong in the same impossible direction. The stone at the heart of England's greatest monument had come from Scotland. Hold that for a moment, because it is only the first of several things about this landscape that do not fit. A ring of gigantic shafts, dug on a scale with no equal in Britain, sat undetected in fields, walked over for a century. 90 standing stones lay hidden beneath a bank that archaeologists had mapped, measured, and thought they understood. Pits older than the stone circle itself appear to point at where Stonehenge would one day be built, centuries before the first sarsen was raised. And the most famous ancient monument on Earth turns out not to be a monument at all, but a single visible fragment of something enormous. For most of modern history, Stonehenge was told as a simple story, a ring of stones on an empty plain raised by a mysterious people standing alone. Every serious discovery of the last decade has made that simple story harder to maintain. And the newest of them points somewhere no one expected, toward the far north of Scotland, and toward a Neolithic Britain far more connected and far stranger than anyone had allowed themselves to imagine. Start with the ground itself. Stonehenge sits on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, southern England, about 80 miles west of London. Chalk grassland, rolling and open, the stones gray against a wide sky. For generations, that emptiness was taken at face value. The monument was the point. The plain around it was just the frame. Then, between 2010 and 2014, a project set out to test that assumption directly. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project, a collaboration led by the University of Birmingham and Austria's Ludwig Boltzmann Institute, under professors Vincent Gaffney and Wolfgang Neubauer, dragged an array of magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar back and forth across roughly 14 square kilometers of that empty plain. They mapped the Earth down to about 3 meters deep. They did not expect to find very much. The area was already one of the most studied archaeological landscapes on the planet. They found 17 previously unknown monuments, ritual structures, ring-shaped enclosures up to 30 meters across, dozens of smaller shrines and pits, an entire buried architecture dating to the very period when Stonehenge took on its iconic shape. Gaffney called the result the ultimate archaeological map. His colleague Paul Garwood put it more plainly. This, he said, was the new baseline. Everything drawn before it now had to be redrawn. And the emptiness that had defined Stonehenge for centuries turned out to be an illusion of not looking closely enough. The instruments were not finished. Less than 2 miles northeast of Stonehenge lies Durrington Walls, a superhenge, one of the largest monuments of its kind in the world. A ring more than 1.5 miles around, enclosing an area where archaeologists believe the builders of Stonehenge actually lived. It had been surveyed, it had been excavated, it was, everyone assumed, well understood. When the radar passed over its great encircling bank, it revealed a row of up to 90 massive standing stones, some as tall as 3 meters, that had been pushed flat and buried beneath the earthwork in antiquity. 30 of them may still survive intact, lying in the dark under the bank, hidden by the very people who raised them. A monument, it turned out, could be built specifically to bury another monument. And nobody had known it was there. Durrington Walls was not finished producing surprises. By June 2020, the same broad research effort announced something that stopped even the archaeologists cold. Around Durrington Walls, centered on it, enclosing it and the nearby site of Woodhenge, the team identified a ring of enormous shafts, not post holes, pits more than 10 meters across and at least 5 meters deep, arranged in a circle over 2 kilometers wide, sealing off an area of more than 3 square kilometers. Carbon dating placed them around 2500 BC, the same era as the henge itself. At least 20 were found. The researchers estimate there may originally have been more than 30. When these were first noticed, the natural assumption was that they were natural, solution hollows, holes dissolved in the chalk by water over millennia. Many archaeologists argued exactly that. It took years of further work, published between 2021 and 2025, to settle the debate. The shafts were dug by human hands, arranged with a precision that implies their makers could measure and lay out a circle 2 kilometers wide across broken ground. It is, on current evidence, the largest prehistoric structure known in Britain. And for 4,500 years, it was invisible. The pits slowly silted up with fine clay until the surface healed over and the whole vast design vanished into ordinary farmland. Gaffney's summary was blunt. The capacity and the desire of these communities to record their beliefs at such a scale was something no one had anticipated. What that scale was for is still an open question. By this point, the pattern is clear. Stonehenge is not an object standing on a plain. It is one lit fragment of a landscape engineered across generations. Avenues, banks, buried stone rows, timber settings, and a 2-kilometer ring of shafts, most of it deliberately hidden or simply never seen. The plain was never empty. We were, and into that reframed landscape came the discovery that broke the last comfortable assumption of all. Return to the altar stone. It lies flat at the very center of the monument, a gray-green sandstone slab, 5 meters long, partly crushed beneath 2 fallen uprights of the Great Trilithon. Most of Stonehenge's smaller blue stones were traced decades ago to the Preseli Hills in West Wales, roughly 140 miles west, already an astonishing distance to move stone before the wheel reached Britain. Because the altar stone sat among those Welsh bluestones, everyone assumed it shared their Welsh origin. That assumption held, essentially unchallenged, for around 80 years. Then researchers from Aberystwyth University, Richard Bevans, Nick Pearce, and Rob Ixer began testing it directly, and their chemistry quietly ruled Wales out. That left the question wide open. So Pearce sent fragments across the world to Anthony Clark's team in Australia, and they measured the ages of zircon, apatite, and rutile grains locked inside the rock. The signature pointed unmistakably to the Orcadian Basin, in the far northeast of Scotland, stretching up toward the Orkney Islands. The findings were published in the journal Nature in August 2024. Robert Ixer of University College London called it a genuinely shocking result. If plate tectonics and atomic physics are correct, he said, then the altar stone is Scottish, which means someone around 2600 BC moved a 6-ton slab of rock at least 430 miles. Some estimates say more than 700 kilometers, across the entire length of Britain, before the wheel, before written language, over forests and rivers and hills. Given those overland barriers, the researchers suspect the answer was the sea. A journey by boat down the coast of Britain, hauling a stone the weight of a small lorry along the water. Susan Greene of the University of Exeter, who was not part of the study, noted what it truly established the first direct physical link between the far north of Scotland and the far south of England in this period. So here is where the title has to be answered honestly. Is this the strange new theory no one saw coming? And does it actually solve anything? In one narrow sense, a mystery was solved. For a century, we did not know where the altar stone came from. Now, with a high degree of certainty, we do. Northeast Scotland. But the theory that grew out of that answer is the genuinely unexpected part, and it does not close the story. It detonates it. The old picture was of scattered, isolated Stone Age tribes, each in its own valley. The Scottish altar stone cannot exist in that world. To move it, the people of Neolithic Britain would have needed long-distance trade routes, seafaring capable of carrying tons of cargo, and a level of political and social coordination stretching from Orkney to Salisbury Plain. A Britain far more unified and far more organized than almost anyone had been willing to claim. And there was already a hint. A distinctive style of pottery, known as grooved ware, first appears in Britain, not in the south, but far to the north, in Orkney, and spreads southward in the centuries before Stonehenge reaches its final form. Ideas, it seems, were already traveling that long north-south road. The altar stone may simply be the heaviest thing ever carried down it. So why haul a single stone the length of a country? Here, the honesty has to hold. We do not know. It may have been a gift, a tribute, an act binding distant peoples into one sacred project, placing the North at the literal center of the South's greatest monument. Every explanation is plausible. None is proven, which is the shape of every theory about this place. Some argue Stonehenge was a great gathering site where scattered communities met and feasted. The pig bones at Durrington Walls suggest enormous midwinter assemblies. Some read it as a monument to the dead, an ancestor place in a wider landscape of burial. Some hold to the astronomy. The alignment on the solstices is real and undisputed. Others see an act of political unification, stone raised to bind a people together, the Scottish slab now fitting that reading almost too neatly. The frustration and the fascination is that the evidence supports a piece of each and settles none of them. The stones will not choose. For a long time, we told ourselves Stonehenge was a single ring on an empty plain. Solved, understood, finished. Almost none of that survived contact with the instruments. The plain was crowded with buried monuments. The Superhenge next door was hiding 90 stones and ringed by the largest prehistoric structure in Britain. And the stone at the very heart of it had been carried the length of a country by people we had badly underestimated, for reasons we still cannot name. Every answer here has behaved the same way. It has not closed the mystery. It has widened it, and the ground has not given up the rest. The shafts around Durrington Walls are still being studied. Researchers are now pulling ancient DNA from the sediment inside them, and the search for the exact Scottish quarry that gave up the altar stone is still underway right now. The next scan of that landscape is already being planned. And if the last decade is any guide, whatever it finds will make the story larger, not smaller. Follow along, because the plain everyone once called empty is nowhere near done talking.